I spent a week off the coast of Africa on the volcanic island of Tenerife in the Canary Islands, exploring different agroforestry systems, all the way from the cloud forests down into the arid south, even seeing the most advanced, oldest syntropic system in the Canaries. We also went to banana farms in these massive greenhouses and saw lots of abandoned agricultural terraces being transformed back into regenerative food systems. So we're going to look at three major things in this video. The first are the problems, whether it's with the climate and the geography that make Tenerife a difficult, challenging place to grow. Next, we're going to look at the journey, how things got to be the way they are today, and what the agricultural history that's led to this moment has been for Tenerife. And finally, we'll start looking at the solutions. We're going to look at agroforestry on abandoned terraces that are revitalizing these spaces and turning them back into productive landscapes again. And at the very end, we're going to look at the key species list. Who are the winners that can even survive without irrigation? The north and south of the island are very different because of the rain shadow effect. On the north is the rainward side of the mountain, where moisture consolidates, it's got regular humidity, great for systems with minimal or even in some cases zero irrigation. And that's really different to the south, which is on the windward side of the mountain. Here there's lots of abandoned agricultural terraces that once were productive but now deemed too degraded to grow anything, so people don't even try. Now another key dynamic of this island is that the elevation gradients play a huge role, and species composition shifts drastically with altitude. Soil from the north, which is better conditions, better soil, more humidity, is mined and sold. So topsoil has become a commodity here and is a form of ecological extraction, taking soil from the north and bringing it to the south, which is more degraded. Most of Tenerife's water comes from these galleries, privately owned tunnels drilled into the mountains for groundwater. And really access here is pay to play. Wealthier resorts and large farms will buy shares, and small farmers and villages often can't afford to. And so this locks out poor or new farmers entirely. Now, your other option here is to get water deliveries every few weeks, but the quality of the water is really unreliable. Sometimes it's way more salty, sometimes it's full of sediment, and sometimes, depending on the time of year, it's just less available. On top of that, water theft is actually a common practice here. The pipes run along all the roads and the streets, and it's not uncommon for people to illegally tap into your water and redirect it to their own tanks, which just creates more mistrust and added stress for growers. So the tourism industry here drives a lot of the economy, and that presents a major challenge because tourism is prioritized at every level: planning, infrastructure, water security, so that the resorts can stay having water, while villages and small farmers are the first to get cut off. Locals are told to conserve water while outsiders use it freely. And a lot of farmers feel trapped. They can't irrigate, they can't grow, and so this is one of the other reasons that has led to a lot of abandonment of agricultural lands and farms, or they're forced to sell to developers. Let's look at the story of agriculture and its development over time in Tenerife. We start with the Guanche era, indigenous subsistence. Basically, this was pastoralism and grains, low input agriculture with grain crops and herding animals like goats and sheep. There were no irrigation networks, no large export systems. It was just subsistence farming and seasonal rhythms. Next was the colonial phase. This was the era of exploitation and export. Spanish conquest erased indigenous systems and gave land to the elites and religious groups. This led to the sugarcane boom for European markets, which required labor, irrigation, and more coastal infrastructure. Then there was a shift to wine as sugarcane declined, which led to massive expansion of the terracing, and Tenerife became plugged into a global trade network at the cost of environmental degradation and social division. Essentially, colonial agriculture built today's terraces and water distribution networks, but this was built for export, not for resilience. The next era was fragmentation and industrial crops. This brought mass amounts of bananas, potatoes, and tomatoes for export. Farms became more fragmented due to inheritance, smaller plots, tighter margins, and declining viability. This also led to greenhouse expansion in the south, which increased the pressure on the water supply. And so really, this era shaped the current land ownership structure, leaving behind lots of small, vulnerable farms. Now, in the modern times in Tenerife, it's dominated by tourism, subsidies, and crisis. Tourism overtook agriculture as the primary economic driver, and lots of land near the coast was sold for resorts. The remaining agriculture became dependent on EU subsidies, especially for bananas. Long story short, the shift from food production to tourism has created major tensions within the island. Declining agriculture and expanding tourism now compete for the same land and water resources. And this right here is the opportunity that agroforestry has. It can bring more security to small farmers and landowners who are facing a huge stack of challenges, both socially and ecologically. So let's dive into what's happening on the ground with these solutions. So the first really interesting site that we visited was a 6-year-old Syntropic site, which is the oldest in the Canary Islands. It's hot, it's super dry, there's very little water, and they're making it work. A lot of people here believe that you can't grow fruit trees or things in general in the landscape because it's just rock. It's just like you're on a volcano, and so think, I just can't grow. Well, here's the evidence. Use density, use diversity, use the local weedscape, use these abrasive pioneer species, and man, you can change conditions so fast. Papaya, bottle brush, more mango. And it's actually a government-funded program on a piece of land that was previously a nursery. So they had some established trees, but 6 years ago they implemented a big Syntropic agroforestry system. And a majority of the employees here are non-agricultural. They don't have backgrounds in agriculture, and it's actually a social program where they'll hire people for 3 years. It's aimed at people who are struggling, whether it's with disabilities, struggling socially, and they bring them in, teach them how to plant, manage, and harvest from these systems. Fruit trees coming in now after 6 years. They're up, they're flowering, the emergents have been thinned out. That's exactly how you would run it. This is super interesting. This is the oldest area of the whole site, and he said that it was the highest concentration of emergent species, like the highest density of emergent strata, and then they've been progressively thinned out to make space for the fruit trees, which is exactly how you would do it. You'd stack it with emergents and high strata, pioneers, fast-growing supports, and then over time progressively thin them out. So now there's still the Casuarina, there's these pioneer species that are emergent, way less of them. It's a great demonstration of what can be possible in a degraded area, and it's got really beautiful connectivity within the local village. It's nested right in a village, so it's got a lot of opportunity to bring more awareness.
Chicos, si quieren coger algún plátano ahí también.
Forest banana.
Y si le cogen algún...
Nice.
The irrigation schedule they do have, they said it's a little bit flexible depending on the time of year, but they said on average about 3 days per week for half an hour each day across the site. And so, you know, it gives you an idea of like how much water might be being used. Really, it's not much when you think about the ecological process that this is restoring, right? More wildlife. You're creating this invaluable seed bank. That's how forests develop, right? Forests don't develop and sweep across the landscape immediately. They develop in these patches. This little patch of forest then goes on to seed other forests. And that's what's happening here. It might seem insignificant. It might seem like, oh, it's only 3 hectares. Look at the big mountain this is. It's, you know, but that's not the point. You're needing to zoom out and say, this 3 hectares is going to seed literally and mentally, because people are going to start visiting here. They're going to get the idea to start something like this at their place, and that's also the seed in the plant material, but also in the idea. An idea is like the way that this spreads just as much as the seeds. At this stage in the project, there's some opportunities for improvement. One would be to consolidate and streamline processes. It's a really diverse system, a lot of complexity at a big scale. So consolidating and streamlining things will make for easier management and more productivity, because they're having to train everybody who doesn't have this background on relatively complex and high diversity systems. And so now that the accumulation has happened, adding in more structure, more commercial species has a huge opportunity here for more production and easier, more simple management and trainability of the employees. Super interesting. We just talked about what 5 species of edibles and supports are kind of best suited for this area, right? Which ones are they seeing the most capacity in these species? And part of that is an exercise in simplification, right? There's limited capacity to manage here. It's quite complex, and especially with limited time, lower skill, we've got 1%, we gotta hurry. Pressure's on. The 5 species of edibles that really thrive here: coffee, the atamoya,
That's it.
papaya,
Banana.
banana, and
canistel.
canistel. The 5 support species that worked really well: the Casuarina, another kind of ficus, another kind of
Ficus
figo,
microcarpa.
the Tipuana tipu, which is a nitrogen fixer, and the black locust.
Yeah, and
And
the
then
Chinus mole.
Chinus
Also
mole.
6. Yeah,
Brazilian pepper tree.
Yeah.
So that's part of the exercises. Start with high complexity. This is 6 years old. It's really complex now, getting difficult to manage. Lower production than you could have based on like how diverse it is. As you move forward, you want to simplify. You want to make things more efficient to manage and more productive by identifying those keystone species, right? I say keystone is in like the ones that are just outperforming on the edible and the support side, because we've built a great foundation. Now it's just how do we make it better? Ooh, we got some papaya.
Oh man.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's nice. And I think the biggest opportunity for this project is that it can be a template for the south of Tenerife. They've already gone through the experimentation of what species work well as supports, which species work well for crops and edible species, and so the template's there. Now people just need to get inspired and go build off of that blueprint. What do you think, Albert?
That's amazing. A lot
Yeah?
of possibilities in here, and yeah.
And I think the cool thing is like these possibilities come. You can be open-ended when you start out. You can not know Like, who knows what you're going to be doing in 6 years, right? You might be doing a million things, but planting these kind of systems gives you the opportunity that otherwise you maybe wouldn't have if you just sat and like planned and I'm going to create the perfect business model. I'm going to create the perfect. It's like just put the forest in, and then that becomes the foundation that can be super flexible for whatever you want to do. Whether you do want to start transitioning into like more commercial production of things, whether you want to open it into like an eco business of sorts, a resort, calisthenics workout in the forest, like a nursery, education based, a sensory garden, meditate. Like there's so many things that are enhanced, and like you're able to do anything you want by just go planting a forest. Go plant a forest, and it will make your dreams come true. Enough said. Go plant a forest. You just need to start. You just need to start planting trees. A lot of people say, oh, but the eucalyptus, oh, but these trees that are not good, they have allelopathy. Don't care. Not true. Invasive, exotic, don't care. Natives alone won't cut it. You need to use every tool in the toolbox because the land needs help, right? Like, look at the landscape around. It's crazy. It's dry. It doesn't hold on to water. There's no organic material in the soil. You need to use these abrasive, aggressive, weedy pioneer species, these invasives, exotics, to kickstart that ecology. And then you can be left with these beautiful fruit trees and nut trees and timbers and medicinals. But you have to just lean into this idea that use every tool in the toolbox. Grow your forest.
Yeah, and here's the evidence. Like, they mix natives, they are a lot of exotic and pioneer plants, and look, that's amazing. Everything's thriving. Then really cool to see all this amazing stuff that they're doing.
In a place that feels like you're actually on the side of a volcano, because we are. Hey, if you're practicing agroforestry and you want to know who else is in your area doing the same work, check out the Food Forest family. It's the free community we have. There's actually an interactive map where you can see who's in your neighborhood, and it gives you the opportunity to connect with other growers, because that's how you learn best. That's why I go travel to these places, to learn best practices from all around the world. And I want you to have that same opportunity. So go check out the Food Forest family. If you do want to work together, if you want support with your project, check out the website, foodforestry.com. Link is below. Let's keep going. The next site is really interesting. They're creating a permaculture demonstration site. This is at Finca Encuentro. Patrick and his partners are restoring an abandoned terrace. Beetroot surrounded by mangoes and other vegetables.
Wow, man, you need to feel how much it weighs.
How many kilos is this? And so this is all planted between the mangoes here. Mango, 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 mango. And you've got a bunch of vegetables. You've got the onions, the cabbage, the beetroot. The beauty of what they're doing here is they're creating a demonstration of what's possible in these abandoned terraces, as an alternate especially to the monoculture of bananas that we see planted all around.
What we're trying to create is a center for applied sustainability. So for people to come, get inspired, take home knowledge, maybe buy some veggies, and not only learning about how to behave sustainable, but also having the example here and having a very low impact while they're being here.
Producing for the community, being more resilient, and creating a template for what works well in that area. This next project is with Emilio on his ridge on the north of the island. High exposure, lots of wind and elevation with a really hard clay soil. Emilio, you've been planting agroforestry for a couple years here. We're on the north side of the island, so you can see it's more humid, there's more vegetation, it's more lush, not so rocky. You've got lines kind of planted on previously what were 3 meter intervals, 3 meters between lines, unirrigated. So you started off like zero irrigation on the lines, and it was in the second year that you added irrigation?
Yeah, in the second year. So everything started to really pop up after the irrigation.
Yep.
At the beginning, the only thing that survived was the eucalyptus.
Right. There's some cactuses. You're also planting vegetables here. We have tomatoes. There's either pumpkin or squash. You had onions over there. So you're adding vegetables on the side of the lines, support species, and the figs and the cactus.
Yeah, everything mixed. Everything mixed, like to get like the most out of every square meter. Like again, like coming from that market garden background, it's like be very efficient in those square meters. Also because we only manage the line, and that way, like since we have the vegetables, like we already have to weed out the lines because we have the vegetables. So in that weeding, we already like clean out the line. We see if we have a plant that we need to replant, another tree or whatever. So that way we can manage it. I mean, we're managing one person, this 3,000 square meters, and it's pretty manageable.
Yeah, because that's where you're concentrating the wood chips, the irrigation, the fertility, the management time goes to those tree lines every 6 meters. Might as well put annuals in, get an extra harvest there.
Yeah, and then we bring the animals to manage the rest.
Yeah, super cool, man.
I understand that people that until they see it, it's kind of complicated to understand how it works and to tell people, okay, the eucalyptus is here, but it's here for you to manage it, and it's going to be a tree that's going to grow and generate that ecosystem for the future succession. You have to leave a little bit of time for people to see it. I see people that now that when they see it and they see how the system works, they said, oh, okay, now this works. Now this makes sense, because you see how it's building up soil, how it constantly generates organic matter, and how the next succession of native plants is actually growing and thriving. If the theory were right, nothing would be growing right now.
Nothing will grow below them, but then there's tomatoes, there's figs, there's all these
everything.
other plants.
And you can see that like the native plants are great, but they take much longer to grow. So right now we're in a moment where we fucked up how we manage the ecosystem, and now we have to use these tools to accelerate that regeneration, take responsibility of what we did, and fix it, and manage it, and change the paradigm with that.
We're used to seeing eucalyptus in a situation where it's planted as a monoculture, it's left alone, and that's a much worse system. That's a system that, of course, you're going to see degradation. Of course, you're going to see an emergent dominant species like a eucalyptus. You know, it could become a fire hazard. It could like make other vegetation suffer when it's just planted as a dense monoculture and left unmanaged. But I think a lot of people only see the negative, only hear the story about eucalyptus, they cause fire. Eucalyptus, they're this allelopathic thing that nothing can grow below them. Well, if nothing can grow below them, why are the Breso doing so well? Why are the little native seedlings popping up? Why can you plant things, manage the eucalyptus, build organic material, create the conditions? Why does it work here? Why can you harvest potatoes, tomatoes, figs, fruits? So the next site was really interesting, also with Emilio, was the chestnut slope in the cloud forest. This is more of a temperate climate, like colder. One thing that's really important is access. When you're thinking about farm design, access is one of the most crucial things that can really mess you up. And so one of the things that makes that challenging, especially in places like here in other parts of Spain and Portugal, terraces. Terraces can make access really tricky, right? Whether it's equipment, whether it's moving animals. And so working with that framework that you kind of just like inherit terraces or not, but if you do, you have to work with what you have.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're looking at here. You've got these terraces, they're of varying widths, and it's really exciting how you're managing that given your context, right? You're interested in doing animals here, chickens, sheep, but also trees. Clearly, we're doing agroforestry here. And so in the temperate context, we're looking at trees like you planted a lot of chestnuts.
Yeah.
We've got mulberries in here, we've got figs, there's apples, there's pears. And so it's these really temperate species that a lot of us aren't used to thinking of using in syntropic agroforestry, but here we are.
Yeah.
And the way you've laid it out is super interesting, because obviously if you want to move animals through here, you need to be able to access for the fencing, for the animals themselves, whether it's a chicken tractor, just access through the terraces. And so you think, how do we plant these trees with the terrace structure, maintaining good access? What you've opted for is planting basically on the edge of the terrace and at the foot.
Yeah.
Super cool. And you guys just planted, so like obviously the trees are really small. They were just planted like less than a year ago, but we'll take a closer look and see what's popping up. A nice species list and composition for like this particular microclimate.
Yeah, it was kind of hard because it's what you say, like there's not like a lot of temperate agroforestry things, but I think like with the chestnuts, everything is solved with chestnuts. You just put the seed in there and you either have like nuts or if not, great wood as well.
Nuts, great wood, chestnuts, walnuts, pecans, almonds, pears, apples, plums, mulberries, like there it is, and berries. Do you know Mark Shepard?
Yeah.
Mark Shepard. This is, go watch Mark Shepard.
Yeah, that's kind of like the structure of all of this is that like, and after we get the forest a little bit more established, the idea like I always like to like put first the things that don't cost me, and then once the system is more established, start investing in different trees. So
grafted fruit trees,
and start with berries.
1,000 or like 3 weeks of work.
I was like, okay, let's step back a little.
Like prefer to do it this way, and let's see if we can at least.
Next we have Albert's site, who actually hosted me for the week while I was there. We went spearfishing. It was an incredible time, and he's the one who generously took me around to all the projects. And Albert's actually in the community. He's helping other projects on the island develop more food forests. This is Albert's demonstration site in the hot, arid south, where water is scarce, the soil is rocky, but he's regenerating these terraces that have been abandoned into productive agroforestry systems. He's also got really steep terraces he's working on, so even in some areas, wheelbarrow access isn't even possible.
I'm Albert. We're here growing on the rocks. That's the name of the project, Creciendo Entre Rocas. And that's it. We're regenerating super rocky soil and we're turning it into a subtropical kind of food forest to inspire more people. Everything's possible if you help nature, even if you have like literally no soil and full of rocks. With actually not much investment, like economically, like just finding the materials around and people that it's wasting a lot of stuff. Then we're using a lot of resources that from waste streams and different companies then throw a lot of organic matter and food scraps. And
Also, nice shirt.
yeah, oh man, it's fucking the best one that I have.
We did a food forest roast call in the community with Albert, maybe like 6 months ago.
Yeah, something like this.
The food forest roast calls are when we get a bunch of people together, you share about your project, you share the details, you share maps, photos, species list, and the team, the community comes together and roasts your system and roasts your design and see how we can make this better, how we can improve it. So we did that with Albert maybe 6-7 months ago, and his systems are doing really well. We changed a few things, added some new stuff, and he's been doing the work. Very cool, man. Big pleasure. Big pleasure to be here, meet Albert, see what he's been doing from not just behind a screen in the community, but being here on the ground. That could be you.
Yeah,
This could
let's
be you.
go.
See you inside. And I forgot to mention this, so I'm going to say it now. English isn't his first language, so huge props to you, man, for like,
Thank you.
you know, it takes a lot of mental work to like translate, retranslate, say something like not your first language, so well done. Being a pioneer of agroforestry in a place where it's not super common, we talked about kind of the struggles of, you know, working with these invasive plants and people don't like them. We talked about a lot of the struggles here in the Canary Islands with like really degraded conditions and water stress, tourism industry, agricultural decline because people are abandoning terraces and it feels like it's an unachievable thing and people are walking away from it. How do you re-inspire and motivate, especially young people, to get back into not just farming, but this new paradigm of regenerative farming and growing for yourself, community, family? And
Thank
go check
you.
his YouTube channel out. He does great stuff. We need more superheroes, like agroforestry superheroes.
Yes.
Do you want a stick?
Yeah, man.
So we're just checking Albert's native soil here, the actual rocks. Digging with a stick to get some soil out to see what it looks like.
You cannot even dig, you know, it's like that's the actual soil. It's just look, and it was this patch. This is all new soil that it's been created, but yeah, it literally doesn't exist. Still not really a lot of soil here. Let's see another part. Yeah, you know, it's more like this kind of soil.
But if it works, it works. You're growing papayas, you're growing things. The process is happening.
Just a few centimeters of topsoil. You can see some life moving around. Organic matter are manure that they're giving me. They're giving me in the village for free. Yeah, the guys here, and amazing. Just putting organic material and manure, and decomposes. Yeah, pretty fast because it's hot here. Then yeah, we give it a bit of a water once every few weeks to help decomposing, and it decomposes really fast with the weather here and creates beautiful soil.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, cool. Things can grow also, like with just topsoil like this. They start getting adaptive. First months are tough for them, but then they're fine.
The last site that we visited was the commercial banana farm on these massive terraces inside of these huge greenhouses, which was an absolute pleasure to go see. This particular site was 15 hectares. They had 22,000 banana plants, and we spoke a lot about the struggles of managing a farm of that scale and just the general struggle of what it's like as a farm operating here with all these constraints of water. And I got a lot of insights here about how we need to be able to make these complex agroforestry systems more accessible, because it's crazy how much of Tenerife's coastlines are dominated by these banana plantations and these terraces. In my mind, I imagine what it would look like to have more diverse, more resilient, less water demanding, less resource intensive agroforestry systems in place of just these banana monocultures. Huge terraces. I mean, these walls are huge. We've got this greenhouse shade cloth over us. We've got bananas that are absolutely pumping. Big scale here. It's 15 hectares, 22,000 banana plants. some intercropping, right? We've got papayas with bananas, we had mangoes up there, we had guavas, avocados.
Hola, soy Dulce Acevedo, propietaria de la finca La Calabacera. Estamos en Guía de Isora, a 100 metros sobre el nivel del mar, y este es un proyecto que se inició hace ya más de 30 años. Mi marido y yo decidimos hacer todas las inversiones de nuestra vida aquí, en esta finca, y dedicarnos a la agricultura.
I think the important discussion really is like the realities of commercial agriculture, right? It's great to like the small food forest and this, but like if we want to be able to take this and have it be legitimate, we need to understand what's happening here. We need to understand these processes and be involved in things at this scale. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to see more of what's happening.
A lot of the problem of the agriculture comes from the European Union, because everyone here used to grow bananas and have a big market selling to mainland and Portugal. But when we got in the European Union, they start telling us, all right now you need to compete with banana from South America. The prices went like super low because or whatever, yeah, and also African banana and all this stuff. And from then we need to compete it with super low prices. Then the banana market went like super low. Then the European Union, no worries, I'll pay you to have bananas to be able to, like, you know, compete with the banana market. And she's been saying that for 20 years. She's been sharing this message for 20 years that this is gonna get worse and worse and worse. And yeah, finally we are at this point here with a big problem with water and big problem with the banana market. She's telling me that everyone learns how to manage bananas a different way. She has people here working. It makes a lot of difference how they manage. Even if she trains them to manage a way, when they used to do it another way, they finally keep doing their thing, and she can lose a lot of production.
And this is exactly the conversation we've been having a lot of, especially more recently, is like Syntropic agroforestry. It seems too complex, it seems out of reach, it seems inaccessible, because especially working at this scale or with less experience in that field, it's like it's super complex. And so how do you scale those processes when you're talking about 22,000 plants? I don't know how many hectares is here.
¿Cuántas hectáreas son aquí?
15.
15 hectares. And so when you're looking at 15 hectares of like super complex, hyper diverse.
Tenemos vino, tenemos huevos de gallinas, porque tenemos 500 gallinas.
So that's the conversation we've been having, is how do you simplify these processes? And that's what they're saying here, is like, how do you simplify the training? How do you simplify the system so that everybody's on the same page? But when you have a super hyper complex agroforestry system, yeah, it works on an acre, maybe 2 acres. But like, as you start scaling up, it's like you need to be able to train people who don't have a background in this, who aren't super passionate about this, who there's so much to learn with conventional agriculture. And that's part of what we need to get involved with to be taken more seriously. Otherwise, Syntropic agroforestry, permaculture, it's always going to look like a joke. Sorry to say it, but it's always going to look like a joke if it's just like people who can't be taken seriously in agriculture. So that's what part of being here is interesting about, hearing these conversations, hearing kind of the challenges, the points, whether it's, you know, with the political side of things, with the labor side of things, with the actual management side of things. Super interesting things.
Yeah, really amazing. Yeah. A lot of learning here, also seeing all this commercial stuff going on and seeing the possibilities to systematize with syntropic agriculture and start experimenting and taking this more serious to be able to have a competitive market with the syntropic farming. Yeah,
super cool. Let's dive into the species selection, the key players that we saw across Tenerife. Number one is my personal favorite because I use a lot of this in New Zealand, and it's actually native to the Canary Islands here. This is Tagasaste, or tree lucerne. It's a nitrogen-fixing shrub, and it's an incredible, powerful species for regeneration. The next were some edibles that actually required very little irrigation and can hold their own in these tough landscapes. Things like fig, almond, chestnuts, and wild grapes. Great foundation for a Mediterranean diet. The next 2 Keystone species we saw are ones that seem to work well across a majority of the island, and they fall into that invasive species category that people give a lot of pushback to, but once they understand the function they play and the role they have in regenerating ecosystems, they become invaluable. And that's castor oil and eucalyptus. The agroforestry practitioners utilize them heavily because of the role they play in building soil, creating a more moderated environment where the temperature shifts are less extreme, there's more humidity to capture, and they create a more livable space, not just for your plants and your soil biology, but also for you. If you need shade around your house, for your garden, they create a livable space because we all want shade. Even me, look at me right now, I'm in the shade, I'm comfortable. That's what these species do. Then a few native species we saw were really interesting, things like the Canarian pine on the south of the volcano that had a very different growth habit, very different form, which was more spread out, more open. And then once you get to the north side of the volcano, more humid, they have a very different moisture capture strategy, which is becoming really dense, almost vertical, kind of like a cattail. Whereas on the south of the island, they're really spread out. Just super interesting to see the different variations within the same species just based on their different conditions. And the other species would fall into the CAM photosynthesizers, things like succulent plants, which were nopales or the prickly pear, agave, and the native drago. These are all species that perform in those really tough environments. I would say deserve a place in almost any agroforestry system here in Tenerife, but also in your systems. If you can find CAM photosynthesizers, these succulent ones for these dry conditions, definitely implement them. Agroforestry is not a one-size-fits-all. It's pattern-based, and once you understand those patterns, you can start applying things at a larger scale with more efficiency. The systems in Tenerife and the template that's already been created with the existing terraces, the crazy diverse species selection, diverse conditions, resource opportunities, and constraints to deal with, Tenerife provides a beautiful template for how to approach agroforestry in any condition.